Hello, welcome to AB Lifetime, channel on transpersonal psychology. Today I am in Upper Manhattan, West Side, with Dr. Tian Dayton. Hello, Tian.
Hello, Anna.
I'm very
Nice
happy to see you.
I'm glad you're here.
And we are talking today about how to use psychodrama in work with trauma and addiction.
So it's the thinking mind that would make sense of and weave these imagery, these sense impressions into a story. Just take a piece of paper, write a line, divide it in 5 years at a time, and write in what feels like it was traumatic. If trauma is never addressed, it feels like it never stops happening. If you're working in the addictions field, as they walk the trauma timeline, and they can also talk about their addiction. What we're doing in psychodrama is finding every kind of way of concretizing. So we're concretizing inner parts of ourselves, complexes, who could play your fears, who could play your depression, who could play your anxiety, then sobering up and becoming fine, that person again. And then they sober up and they don't remember being drunk and horrible, so they want you to forget it.
Could you please tell about the videos on RTR?
So for a while I was traveling and training a lot of facilities and using RTR, and several of them filmed the trainings, and they're on my website tiandayton.com under RTR tab. They're helpful in seeing the model, and I've got a lot of different ones, a lot of different versions of the same work.
You have very good videos.
And I've been just lucky that people have been wanting to do that. Some are floor checks, some are trauma timeline, but I think if you watch them enough, you do get a sense of how the model should look. And they're various groups. Some are little groups, some are big groups. And it works in any size group. So those are the videos. And we talked about the floor check.
Could you please tell a little bit about trauma timeline?
That's a big one that took me years actually to get right. It went through so many permutations. The reason I did the trauma timeline was because one of the things that traumatized people deal with is that their traumas feel out of context. They're these lacuna, these disembodied little brain fog warps, floating around, and they never got integrated into the self system, understood because of the nature of the traumatic moment. When you're being traumatized, when you're being very terrified, your thinking mind shuts down, your limbic system revs up, right? So you're pulling in all of the sensorial information that the limbic system processes, along with the emotion that the limbic system processes. You're pulling in the sights, the sounds, the smells, the feelings associated with it, oftentimes a feeling of terror and not so many other feelings, but you are not thinking about it. So it's the thinking mind that would make sense of and weave these imagery, these sense impressions into a story. So the upshot of that is they live inside of you as body memories. And you don't know why they're there. And you don't know, there's no storyline. So you need a way in trauma work to allow the right story to emerge, and have it calm enough and easy enough so that the thinking mind of the protagonist wakes up and makes sense of its own story. You don't want to impose other stories on the protagonist. Memory is too delicate. You don't want to put ideas in people's heads too much. You want them making sense of their own stories, which is why sometimes you do some good work from the audience role, because there's no pressure to do your own work. You just see yourself in it, and the ahas are many. But how to work with this? So you need to work with it in many ways, right? Role play is perfect. Role play is wonderful, but role play can get out of control, and does oftentimes, and it can go in directions that are not useful to trauma resolution, and does many times. It depends on the skill of the practitioner, but even a really skillful practitioner, if they don't understand trauma, or they don't, they're not in a good place, or they're not so straight with themselves, can have it go all over the map. So you want the role play to be contained. Simple role play. The doubling really does serve to connect the limbic and the thinking mind. The double says that which is not being spoken from the role. That's the double's job, right? So it's very important that the doubling be really sensitive and accurate and good. And that the person doubling, once the protagonist catches it, gets out of the way and sits back down. That's how I work with it. Now you can, and role reversal, the empathy building for the role reversal. So you bring trauma work in from many angles. And maybe later we'll talk more about doubling, but you were asking about the trauma timeline. So how to put it back in context. I thought, what about, let me try a timeline. Because we, in psychodrama, Zerka had worked with a developmental timeline, but nothing with trauma or any of that kind of stuff. So I tried first, use the traumas of your life, right? The things that really made you go, where you feel you have work to do, where you shut down, where it's a blank, where write the stuff that really hurt. And then I tried, over a period of many years, a bunch of different ways. Add the resilient building moments, add the stuff you used to cope with. I've tried so many ways of doing this. Color coding, different, shelf paper, all kinds of ways. What I've discovered is that simple is best. The most efficient thing seems to be just take a piece of paper, write a line, divide it in 5 years at a time, and write in what feels like it was traumatic. And then share it. And as people share it, what I observed is, doing really thousands of these things, that two things really emerge frequently for people. One was, oh my gosh, this period of my life was relatively free of trauma, but I felt like I was carrying it always because we never talked about it, we never addressed it. So if trauma is never addressed, it feels like it never stops happening.
Right.
And another thing people would say was, gosh, since I've been in recovery, I've had bad things happen, but they don't feel traumatic because I've been processing as I go. Another thing people say that's common is, I see now what I've been reenacting. So you want to keep the timeline simple enough so people have the opportunity to see themselves in action. And what this does, of course, is start to place the traumas of life into the context of the overall lifespan. Because otherwise they are decontextualized. They just float outside of the integrated sense of self. So you experience these now. You can use this timeline in many ways. It has become such an industry standard that people think it was always there, but it was not always there. I developed this painstakingly, and it was really one of my trauma achievements. This was hard to do, and but it is used now everywhere, and I don't know that anyone knows I really did this, but I did, and you can put it along a floor and say you can just have one person walk the trauma timeline. As somebody, if you're working in the addictions field, as they walk the trauma timeline, and they can also talk about their addiction, so that they can make the connection between trauma and addiction. This is what was going on in my life, and here is where I found, ice cream. I used to go into the room in the dark and eat ice cream as a kid. I stole candy. Then I got a little older, beer. I found beer, that took away some pain. Then I found pot, and I really liked pot. And this is how addiction starts.
Right.
This is the connection between trauma and addiction that people can make on their own or more organically by walking the trauma timeline. So that's a single person doing it. Now they could, at any point in their walking, they could talk to themselves along the trauma timeline, right?
Right.
Do you want to talk to yourself as a as a 6-year-old? Do you want to? And you can enroll. I've tried it every different way. So I have had people lined up enrolling everybody. It gets a little overwhelming. It's better not to do that because it's too much for everybody, actually. So if there's heat, if there's warm up, then should we talk to somebody? Who could play that part of you? It could be an empty chair. It could be, and you do all the same doubling, reverse rolls, all that stuff. And then you've got many versions of yourself along the trauma timeline, and you can start to integrate those. Or if it's a group, it's magical because if you put it out on the floor and you do it as a group, then you just invite. You can share. You can do the trauma timeline, and then everybody can individually share. Or you can you can do both, or you can do just this. Walk up to the age at which you feel you just sort of, you just sort of have some work to do. You can use. I try to keep it as loose as possible. What I ask people to do. In other words, you don't want to say walk up to an age where you thought you really experienced something traumatic, or it really scared you and shut you down, and you just want to go walk up to where there's something to do, something to work, and you will see that's another connect each person becoming a therapeutic agent because the babies will be at the same age, the 10-year-olds will be together, the teenagers will be together, the early adults will be together, the later adults. So share with each other. Well, they have more to give each other than I do have to give them because they're in the same place together. And the room will, again, come alive with that kind of sociometric sharing because they are all sociometrically aligned according to age. So that's a way you can use it in the group. And then, of course, the protagonist can warm up and come out of that, and you can do psychodrama. Ask different questions. Now, the criterion question first, where is there some work to do? But you can ask another question, where do you feel, if you want a resilience building question, where do you feel great about yourself? Go along a line and find an age where you feel a door flew open for you and suddenly life made sense, or you did something you felt great about and share about that. You want to capture all of that stuff too. A woman I was working with whose parents went through the Holocaust said, my trauma starts before the timeline. So we did her drama before the age of 0, and then you're working with her parents and the trauma that she took on from them, and that was the most serious part of her trauma timeline. You can throw it out into the future. What are you afraid of out there? Who could play yourself out there? Talk to yourself out there. Reverse roles. You can do anything. That's the beauty of psychodrama. That's what you learn working with people like Zerka. You can do anything. The world is your palette. Life, all of life, before, during, and after, in the future, in the past. It's all there to work with, and to have the ability to do to talk to yourself in the future. Where do you talk to God? How many times do you get to talk to God? If it's a somatodrama, who could play your stiff neck? Who asks you to talk to your stiff neck? If you're somatizing trauma, you can play body parts. You can talk to that first moment when I was in Bob's group, that first time I encountered psychodrama, I did a drama about my operation, about having a radical hysterectomy, and I had people playing body parts. Somebody played my father. It was a woman with earrings and pearls, but all the as if fell away became as, and it all became part of my inner world concretized. What we're doing in psychodrama is finding every kind of way of concretizing. So we're concretizing inner parts of ourselves, complexes, who could play your fears, who could play your depression, who could play your anxiety. It's all a process of concretization, and that's what the trauma timeline is too. You're concretizing the length of your life, or what happened before, or what you're afraid could happen in the future, and you're just putting it out there so each part can be explored and then integrated and pulled into the context of your life, so you have a sense of beginning and a middle and an end. Trauma takes that away. You lose a sense of a beginning, a middle, and an end. You lose a sense of a before and after. So you want to reconnect with who you were before the trauma, if you in fact can. And many people do with the trauma timeline. They find themselves, wait a minute, I wish I were this carefree 8-year-old again. Who could play that 8-year-old? What do you want to say to that? Reverse roles, and what does that 8-year-old want to say back to you?
Mm-hmm.
You can go in any direction you want to go. These things are just giving you a trauma specific, the useful in trauma map to keep it safe.
Right.
The same with the floor check of symptoms. They're just to keep the subject matter in front of people in a way that is user friendly, and that that's easy and that's fun.
Which book you would recommend on trauma timelines for people who want to use it in their work? Which book is better to use that? Is it The Living Stage?
In The Living Stage.
Yes.
And
yes.
And I've got it in RTR.
Both of them.
Neuropsychodrama. Oh, I forgot, and I don't have a copy of that to show. But Neuropsychodrama, I did just because I just wanted to write everything down that I thought about trauma in one place and then let it go. And so I really did that as a kind of a service, I thought. But to write a book about the thinking behind trauma work. So Neuropsychodrama is if you want to do trauma work, please read Neuropsychodrama.
All right.
How to think about working with trauma. How to think about it. And that's very important. And you don't want to get lost in roles with trauma work. You want to understand that the real work is in the reliving. Here's a little interesting thing that can happen. When somebody is in that moment of reliving, they're so vulnerable, and they might be extremely quiet and hard to see. You might see it in their eyes or their face. The doubling from the group, I let anybody in the group double, and I like to do that because you never know where the right double is going to come from. And I don't require people to ask me because I feel then you miss the moment. I just say jump up and double when you feel it, and double fast, and the second the protagonist grabs it, sit down. Those are the instructions I have, because the problems with doubling, from my point of view, happen when somebody you think, that I identified with that, I could double that, and then they don't.
Right, so and they sit for 5 minutes thinking, is it right or not, and missing the moment.
Yeah. Then they get up and they double. It's like a badly dubbed movie.
And sometimes they never double.
Or they double the wrong stuff, and the protagonist has to go backwards and think, does that fit? Well, that sort of fit well. But the protagonists are time traveling. They're working at the speed of light. So if you don't double
at the right moment.
And other times people do their drama from the double position, right?
Right.
So they want to get rid of their drama at the expense of the protagonist, because they don't want to do their own drama, but they want to sneak it into the protagonist. So you have to work with that and not let people do that, and just kind of. Or some people just double in a very heady, disconnected way, and it's really a disservice to the protagonist. And that person, you have a responsibility to bring out of there. Now, the easiest way I've found is the less shaming for the person doubling. Is ask the protagonist, does that fit for you? And if they say yes, then okay, great, I was wrong. Go with it. Put in your words, and then I would just look at the person doubling and say thank you, and hope they sit down. And if they don't, just say, thanks, that's good for now. If the person won't let it go, see, somebody can get very attached to that, not very often, but that can happen, and then they don't realize how off they are, but they feel they've put themselves out there, right? So it's easiest with the protagonist. It doesn't fit. So then you can say, make it your own. Or let it go. Don't worry about it, because if the double is wrong, that can serve the protagonist too, because it can be clarifying. There's something called the antagonistic double. In psychodrama, which I don't use intentionally, because there's plenty of antagonism spontaneously in the room. But it can be useful to the protagonist because it doesn't feel right, and then you just say, correct it or make it right for you. But always I try to get the double to sit down quickly, because ultimately this is a protagonist drama, and I want them to find their way through. And I double a lot through directing. So I depend on my own sense of doubling. And I welcome protagonists to make me wrong.
Could you please tell about emotional sobriety?
This is a term coined by Bill Wilson, Bill W., who is credited with starting 12-step programs, AA. Bill W. Talked about emotional sobriety as the next horizon for addicts when they get sober. In other words, it's one thing for them to be sober physically, but it doesn't mean you're emotionally sober. Now, the reason this is a very meaningful subject for me is because I work so much with adult children of alcoholics, and ACoAs are oftentimes not emotionally sober. We may be physically sober. Many ACoAs don't use drugs or alcohol, but we have modeled the emotional dysregulation of the addict. And what happens if you live with an addict for long enough, the family becomes emotionally dysregulated just by proximity. There's no, most addicts don't sit down with you and say, gosh, I must have hurt you when I was drunk and, insulting you or hiding so let's talk about it, right? Who does that? That doesn't happen in alcoholic families. What happens is that you want to say that hurt me, and you say, go to your room, don't ever, what a poison tongue. There's rage. You learn not to talk about what's really going on with you. And the whole family learns not to talk about what's really going on. It's too frightening. It's too disturbing to see somebody you love turning into a monster before your eyes. And then sobering up and becoming fine, that person again. And then they sober up and they don't remember being drunk and horrible. So they want you to forget it. And you sort of do, because you want to forget it too. So the family seesaws in this world of emotional dysregulation. And also, of course, trauma is fundamentally emotionally dysregulating because of the fight, flight, freeze. You're shutting down your emotions. So what happens with people who've experienced trauma is we tend to go through. I was in Canada one time trying to talk about emotional sobriety, and there was this big room of people, and they were all looking at me, and I said, well, you go from 0 to 10 and 10 to 0. 0 to 10, 10 to 0, with no speed bumps in between, no 4, 5, and 6. And the very nice man who hired me said, keep that, people got it. It's a good way to talk about it. Because it is hard to talk about, but that makes it easy to think of living in 4, 5, and 6. If you've been used to living from shutdown to intensity, you think 4, 5, and 6 is a crashing bore. But in fact, 4, 5, and 6 is where you can expand this way from. If you're living from 0 to 10, you are just living this lateral emotional life. You're not really feeling anything. It's in the middle that you feel. You walk and chew gum at the same time. You think and feel at the same time. That's where the tears can come. That's where you can sit with the feeling long enough so the thinking mind can actually make sense of it. That's where the integration of thought and feeling happens. And body sensations. That's where you can actually be alive while living. This is what it was. Albert Schweitzer said the difficulty in life is to stay alive while living. You're not staying alive while living if you're either shut down or you're acting out through super intensity. And by the way, that's sort of how the alcoholic family starts to seek balance with a traumatized person. They're shut down, and then that gets to be too much, so they rev up, and then that gets to be too much, so they shut down again. And they seek regulation by going by shooting right past regulation. So emotional sobriety, I grabbed as a concept because it fits so well for the population of traumatized people and ACoAs. And ACoAs have a post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
That's why I wrote the ACoA Trauma Syndrome, because I wanted to make the connection for people that the reason you're, it's like relationships are our gunfire, right? We learned the same way as a soldier hears a car backfiring, he hits the deck. Relationships are our gunfire. The ACoA may function beautifully on their own. They may get out of their alcoholic home. And remember, ACOAs are traumatized, but they're also, high achievers, looking good families. They know how to manage a crisis. So we can thrive out there. But then put us in another relationship, give us a partner, or challenge us with raising children, and the trauma rears its head because the feelings of dependency and vulnerability. Who wants that? What if you've been traumatized as a child? ACEs, adult adverse childhood experiences. It's all this population needs emotional sobriety. If you've been traumatized as a child, you learned not to be vulnerable. You learned not to feel your feelings, and you learned that depending was a really bad idea. If you have an alcoholic parent, you learn to make your own school lunch, and you learn to forge your own permission slips. Because you can't depend on your alcoholic parent to do it. And the parent who's not the alcoholic gets so debilitated that they're not doing so well either. So you learn dependency is a bad idea. Well, if you want to be in an intimate relationship, you have got to feel you've got to be willing to be vulnerable and dependent and open-hearted if you want to have intimacy. Otherwise, you're not very close. You're not communicating, and you need to learn how to fight fair. No person who grows up in these kinds of homes we grew up in learns how to fight fair. You learn that's stupid to fight fair, because if you fight fair and you take responsibility, then the rest of it's going to get heaped right on you. So you learn how to, suit up and to shut up. You learn how to get what you need out there. So emotional sobriety is a skill that the adverse childhood experiences, a traumatized population, an ACoA population, it's all trauma, needs to develop that skill. And it's not so hard once you can wrap your mind around it. You just have to, survive the feeling when it gets triggered. Because when it gets triggered, it's not just the emotion that's getting triggered, it's the physiology of the feeling, the heart racing, the throat goes dry, and you don't want to go near any of it. It's not just the feeling you want to avoid, it's the feeling in your body you want to avoid. It's such a shaky feeling. Remember when I was in group myself, for months when I would get triggered by the work other people were doing, my jaw would just shatter. And it was just trauma leaving my body. It took months for me to get over that. But as the trauma started to leave my body, I what Peter Levine calls shake, rattle, and roll, shiver and shake. And you'll see that with psychodrama. You will see as trauma leaves people's body, their legs might shake or their body, and just let them. Don't just go for it. Shake it away. They don't have to do anything. Like, I don't say shake it off. I just let their body do what it naturally wants to do. Because here you're forcing it again. You're trying to control it. They'll shake well enough. Just let them do it. In my case, it was jaw. And so, is that answer?
Yeah, it is answer. And it's interesting because while we have this conversation, your jaws are so relaxed. Before you told this,
interesting.
I paid attention like 10 minutes ago.
Interesting. Wow.
Because I know that my jaw is like kind of like have tension.
Yeah. It's a natural place to hold tension.
Wow. That's interesting. Thank you for
here. Here. I was in involved with a yoga ashram. My husband and I, before we were married, and then when our children were very small, and we did yoga practice and meditation these were in our early 20s, and really I worked in a therapy program there and did biofeedback with clients, and that's invaluable for an adjunct to trauma work. It's through meditation you're as you sit, you learn to sit with the feelings, and your thinking mind in meditation does start to witness thoughts, so that you learn to get less glued to them. Trauma kind of glues it all together. Meditation helps it unglue, so that the thinking mind can start to witness the activities of the body and the limbic world, and you learn to have that witness is a very powerful thing to have.
Thank you for telling this, because I'm all the time, with my channel, I'm telling about, I'm Ashtanga yoga practitioner, and I'm practicing for 10 years.
Oh, you
And
can
it is,
see it in
yes,
your face.
so I all the time tell practice Ashtanga yoga is wonderful, breathing. And I also practice meditation, mostly Vipassana, which is silent meditation.
Wow.
So thank
No
you
wonder
for
you look so joyful.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
It shows.
Mm-hmm.
That's your skin, by the way.
Oh.
I don't know if people can tell, but I always watch people's faces. And if I do trauma work with people, I look at their face the next time they come. But the first thing I noticed about you was your skin is incredibly luminous.
Oh, wow, thank
and
you.
your eyes are very clear and bright. And
yes.
That's
yes.
yoga and psychodrama.
Yeah, yoga, psychodrama, meditation. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. My husband and I have been both doing work all of our lives. Our poor children don't even want to hear the word out. I mean, we've done so much work on ourselves because we each had an alcoholic parent. And we each had our families divorced sort of, like spectacularly, lots of drama and pain and, just alienation. And so we realized that we had to do so much work to just level out. And we can see also, if you don't do the work, we're old enough now, 69 and 70, to look out and see when people don't do work, what happens to the next generation. The trauma just keeps going. It just keeps going. That alcoholism gene people talk about does not have to be turned on by the epigenetic bad behavior. That's what makes the next generation want to drink and drug again. But it takes so much work to get over this kind of trauma, or any kind of trauma. But then you free up the next generation.
You kind of breaking the cycle.
You're breaking
of this,
the cycle.
Yeah.
You're breaking the chain. You're breaking the cycle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, this was such a wonderful interview.
Love
Thank
it.
you so much.
Thank you.
And guys, thank you for watching, and see you in next video. Namaste.
Namaste.